this is the Talmud Daf Yomi. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 60. So it says, I read into 60 for the last video, but I'll start here. But the other wine in the barrel is permitted. There are those who say that Rav Papa said the wine until the stopper in the upper portion of the barrel is prohibited, but the other wine in the barrel below the stopper is permitted. So Rav Yamar says Rav Papa's ruling is subject to dispute between Tanaim, as the Mishnah teaches in Tevel Yom 2:7, in the case of a barrel that was pierced, whether on its top or on its bottom or on one of its sides, if one who immersed that day touched it, it is ritually impure. Rabbi Yehuda says, if it was pierced on its top or on its bottom, it is impure. If it was pierced on one of its sides, the wine is pure, whether it was touched from here or from there, that is, on either side. Only the wine that he touched is rendered impure. According to the first version of Rav Papa's statement, he holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. So Rav Papa says, in a case where a Gentile is pouring wine from the barrel and a Jew is holding the beaker or the kuva into which it is poured, the wine is prohibited. What is the reason? When the wine comes out of the barrel, it comes out by force of the Gentile's action. In a case where a Jew is pouring the wine from the barrel and a Gentile is holding the beaker into which it is poured, the wine is permitted. But if the Gentile tilts the beaker to the side, the wine is prohibited. So Rav Papa says, in the case of this Gentile who carries a sealed wineskin and a Jew is walking behind him, in ensuring that the Gentile does not touch the wine itself, the halacha depends on the circumstances. If the wineskin is full, the wine is permitted, as the wine in the wineskin is not shaken. If the wineskin is incompletely filled, the wine is prohibited, as perhaps the wine in the wineskin might have been shaken by the Gentile, which would have the same halacha as wine poured as a libation. In the case of a beaker which is open on top, if it is full, the wine is prohibited, as perhaps the Gentile might have touched the wine. If the beaker is incompletely filled, the wine is permitted, as the Gentile did not touch the wine. So Rav Ashi says, in the case of a wineskin, whether it is full or incompletely filled, it is permitted. What is the reason that the wine is permitted, even if it is shaken within the wineskin? It is because this is not the typical manner of offering a libation. With regard to a wine press, where the grapes are pressed with beams, rather than trod by foot, Rav Papi deemed permitted wine that is produced by a Gentile, as the Gentile does not touch the wine. Rav Ashi, and some say it was Rav Shimi bar Ashi, deemed the wine prohibited. The Gemara comments, in a case where the wine is pressed by the means of the Gentile's direct force, everyone agrees that the wine is prohibited. They disagree when the wine is pressed by means of force generated by his force. Conversely, there are those who say that in a case where the wine is pressed by means of a force generated by the Gentile's force, everyone agrees that the wine is permitted. They disagree when the wine is pressed by means of the Gentile's direct force. The Gemara relates, there was an incident in which the wine was pressed by means of a force generated by the Gentile's force, and Rav Yaakov from the Har Pakod deemed the wine prohibited. The Gemara relates, there was a certain barrel that split lengthwise from top to bottom. A certain Gentile jumped up and encircled it with his arms in order to prevent the wine from spilling. So Rav bar Papa, and some say it was Rav Huna, son of Rabbi Hoshua, deemed it permitted to sell the wine to Gentiles, as the wine was rendered prohibited only for drinking but not with regard to deriving benefit. The Gemara notes, this statement applies only in a case where it split lengthwise, but where the barrel split widthwise, the Gentile held the top and bottom halves together. It is permitted even for drinking. What is the reason that the wine is permitted? The wine is merely performing the action of a brick by weighing the barrel down, and he is not doing anything to the wine. The Gentile is performing merely an action of a brick by weighing the barrel down, and he is not doing anything to the wine. Okay, so the Gemara relates, there was a certain Gentile who was found standing in a wine press. So Rav Ashi said, if there is enough wine in the wine press that it is moist enough to moisten other items, the wine press requires rinsing and requires a more thorough cleansing, as the Gemara will explain in 74b. But if there is not enough wine to moisten other items, merely rinsing it is sufficient for it. So now the Mishnah says, in a case of a Gentile who was found standing next to the wine collection vat, if there is a loan owned by the owner of the wine vat to the Gentile, the wine is prohibited. Since the Gentile maintains that he has a right to the owner's property, he has no compunctions about touching the wine, but there is no loan owned by the owner of the wine vat to the Gentile, the wine is permitted, as it is assumed that the Gentile did not touch the wine that was not his. If a Gentile fell into the wine vat and emerged from it, or if he measured the wine in the winepress with a pole without touching it with his hands, or if he cast a hornet out of the wine by means of a pole, and the pole touched the wine, or where the Gentile was removing the foam that was on top of the fermented barrel of wine. With regard to all these cases, there was such an incident. And the sages said that the wine may be sold to Gentiles, as it is permitted to derive benefit from the wine, but not to drink it. And Rabbi Shimon deems the wine permitted even for drinking. That's a minority case. So in a case where a Gentile took the barrel of wine and threw it in his anger into the wine vat, this was an incident that occurred, and the sages deemed the wine fit for drinking. So now the Gemara says, the Mishnah teaches that in the case of a Gentile who was found standing next to the wine vat, if the owner of the vat owes money to the Gentile, the wine is prohibited. So Shmuel says, and this halacha applies only when the loan includes the qualification that the Gentile has a lien on that wine, as only then does the Gentile feel that he is entitled to touch the wine. So Rav Ashi said, the wording of the Mishnah is also precise according to Shmuel's interpretation, as we learned in the following Mishnah, 61a. And in the case of a Jew who renders the wine of a Gentile permitted by treading the Gentile's grapes so that the wine can be sold to Jews, and he then places the wine in the Gentile's domain until he sells it, the halacha depends on the circumstances. If that one Gentile writes for the Jew, I receive money from you in payment for the wine, even though he did not yet receive the actual payment, the wine is permitted. This is because the wine is considered the Jew's property, and there is no reason to suppose that the Gentile might touch it. But in a case where the Jew desires to remove the wine and the Gentile does not allow him to do so until the Jew gives him the money due to him, this was an incident that occurred in Beit Sha'an, and the sages deemed the wine prohibited. Rav Ashi explains, the reason that the wine is prohibited is that the Gentile does not allow the Jew to remove the wine, and therefore the Gentile is considered to have some degree of ownership of the wine. Therefore, one can infer that if the Gentile allows him to remove the wine is permitted, even though the Jew still owes him money. One may conclude from the Mishnah that in order for the wine to be prohibited, we require the loan to include the qualification that the Gentile has a lien on that wine. The Gemara affirms one may conclude Shmuel's principle from the Mishnah. The Mishnah teaches that if a Gentile fell into the wine collection vat and emerged, it is not prohibited to derive benefit from the wine. So Rav Papa says the sages taught this halacha only in the case where the Gentile emerged from the vat dead. But if he emerged alive, the wine is prohibited. So the Gemara asks, what is the reason that the wine is prohibited? Rav Papa said, since the Gentile was rescued from death, he considers that day like their festival day, and he offers the wine as an idolatrous libation in thanksgiving. So the Mishnah teaches that if the Gentile measured the wine in the winepress with a pole, or if he cast a hornet out of the wine by means of a pole, or if he removed the foam on top of a fermented barrel of wine, with regard to all these cases there was such an incident, and the sages said that the wine may be sold to Gentiles, but one may not drink it. And Rabbi Shimon deems the wine permitted even for drinking. So Rav Ada bar Ahava says, may blessings rest upon Rabbi Shimon's head, as his reasoning is clear. When he deems the wine permitted, he deems it permitted even with regard to drinking, and when he deems the wine prohibited, he deems it prohibited even with regard to deriving benefit from it. So Rav Chia, son of Abba bar Nachmani, says that Rav Hista says, that Rav says, and some say that Rav Hista says, that Ze'eri says, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. There are those who say that Rav Hista says, Abba bar Hanan said to me, this is what Ze'eri says, the halacha is in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Despite this, the Gemara concludes, but the halacha is not in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. Okay, the Mishnah teaches, with regard to the case where a Gentile took a barrel of wine and threw it, in his anger, into the wine vat, this was an incident that occurred and the sages deemed the wine fit for drinking. So Rav Ashi says, with regard to any form of contact through which a zav renders an object ritually impure, in a case where a Gentile has that same type of contact with wine, he renders it, the wine, used for a libation. In the case of any form of contact through which a zav has, in the case of any form of contact through which a zav does not permit ritual impurity, does not transmit ritual impurity, leaving an object ritually pure, the Gentile does not render the wine with which he has contact used wine for libation. So Rav Huna raised an objection to Rav Ashi from the Mishnah. With regard to the case where a Gentile took the barrel of wine and threw it in his anger into the wine vat, this was an incident that occurred in Beit Sha'an, and the sages deemed the wine fit for drinking. One may infer that if the Gentile threw the wine in his anger, yes, it is permitted, but it was not in his anger. But if it was not in his anger, the wine is not permitted. So, even though in the case of a Zav, if he threw an object at a vessel, it does not render the vessel impure. And that is the end of Daf 60.